Hi, listeners. Welcome to the Grief Out Loud podcast produced by the Dougie Center for Grieving Children. I'm Jana and wanted to give you just a little heads up as you listen to this episode. You'll be hearing references to our old name, which was Dear Dougie. So just so you don't get too confused, you're listening to the right podcast, and we look forward to bringing you even more great content under the Grief Out Loud name. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everybody. This is Brendon Connolly over at the Dougie Center, and I'm here with
Jana.
Hi, Jana.
Hi, Brendon.
This is a funky thing because Jana and I, this is a little inside baseball on this podcast. We're in the same building, and maybe even to you it sounds like we're talking to each other across the table, but we're not, are we, Jana?
No, we're actually in our own offices.
Yeah, it's a little weird to be in our own offices, but it works out okay. And this is our DIY podcast setup with minimal investment, and we hope you enjoy it.
So I'm excited today, Brendon, because we, in our last episode, we talked just more broadly about some things about grief and the timelines of grief and the myths of how that works out for people. And then this week, I believe we've got 2 questions from people who wrote in wanting some information and some help.
Yeah, that's right. We have the first question from Anna, and she is asking what to do with her partner's ashes. And she has 2 kids, ages 5 and 12. And she's just trying to figure out, she doesn't mention how long ago her partner died or how long the ashes have been around, but she's hoping to get some insight on how to involve the kids, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Like, what do I do now? And it sounds to me like, maybe for some people they have a clear idea from the person who died. Maybe they'd had a conversation or a plan around what the person who died wanted to have done with their body or with their ashes. And it sounds like for Anna, there's no information about that. So she's sort of left on her own trying to figure out what to do. And with kids, I mean, you've got kids that are a little bit older than that, Brendon, I think.
Yep, I've got 10 and 13. Yeah, a little bit older.
And so, how important it can be to make sure the kids get involved in some way.
Yeah, the ashes is interesting. I haven't had a lot of experiences like this. Although I will say, a while back, last summer, 2 summers ago, my uncle died, and his kids, my cousins, took his ashes and had them made into a kind of. This is going to sound awful, but it was kind of a Alka-Seltzer, big old Alka-Seltzer tablet, and we paddled it out into the ocean, a bunch of people, and that was really meaningful for my cousins and for me, really. But my uncle was a surfer, so a bunch of his buddies and family, we all got on our boards and paddled out into the Pacific and said so long to Uncle Bill. It was cool. It was really nice.
So they found something that was really representational of who he was in the world and something that he loved.
Yep.
In a way they could connect.
Yep.
And was that something did he know about what he wanted beforehand, or was that something your cousins came up with?
Well, I don't think he knew. I think he knew that he wanted to be cremated, so he knew that much. But I don't think he wasn't expecting to die, and I don't think he ever really thought a whole lot about it. He was focused on the right now with everybody. He was really trying to be real present with folks, and wasn't the kind of guy to plan super far into the future. So I think they ended up with his ashes, and then they knew they were going to have some kind of a surf memorial with friends. So they pulled it together, the 2 of them, and they're adults, and so they probably did their research and figured out the best way to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. So they had sort of half the story of knowing their dad wanted to be cremated, but then the rest of it they created. And it sounds like for Anna, that's, she's in that situation. And with having younger kids, one of the things that's so important to start with is that there's no right or wrong thing to do with the ashes. There's no prescription. And when you have a family involved, it can it can involve some negotiating with the other people in the family.
Yeah.
So, there's Anna and her two children. There may be some in-laws involved. There may be some other people that need to be involved in that discussion or not. And that can be so different for everybody. Some families will choose to keep the ashes at home with them forever, and other families choose to scatter the ashes or have the ashes buried. There can be questions about whether or not to keep the ashes all together or to separate them out so that different people in the family can have portions of those ashes. So there's a lot of different things to think through, but under the guise of knowing that there's no right thing to do.
Yeah, and you talk about family, but I'm also thinking of, I know I've heard of stories of people who have had really strong community ties, and maybe not necessarily with their spouse or their partner. They may have some interest on this, like a railroad club or something that they do with their friends, and have this tight bond with those people, and then also a tight bond with family, and then everybody, feels a pull to honor and memorialize the person in their way, and so then the family is maybe wrestling with some of those community questions too, right?
Exactly, right. So maybe, starting for Anna and her kids and for the three of them to have a conversation. Maybe she talks to both kids together. Maybe she has a conversation separately with her 5-year-old or her 12-year-old because they may be understanding things differently. But to ask them first, do you want to be involved in what we decide to do, or do you not? Because for some kids, they may not want to, and that's okay. And if the kids do want to be involved, to start talking through some of the options. And it may be really helpful for Anna to first get clear for herself what she thinks she's comfortable with or not comfortable with, so that when the kids are coming up with other ideas, not to say that she won't be open to their ideas, but that she has some sense of what she would like to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I imagine kids need, I know my kids at least my little one, is so full of questions and needs lots of additional explanation on things, maybe more than I just assume a lot of things, and then he just has all these questions about backstory and everything. So I imagine that would happen as well. You may be pushed into talking a lot more than you really wanted to.
Exactly. And kids may ask questions that could make adults very uncomfortable. I was
Yeah.
talking with one of my coworkers yesterday who shared a story of a kid who was maybe a year younger than Anna's youngest. I mean, I think he was 4, and there was a discussion about what to do with Dad's ashes, and one of the options were to scatter the ashes in the garden because the dad loved to garden. And for this little guy, he got very confused. He's like, "Well, how does that work? I mean, does that mean that part of Dad will be over here and part of Dad will be over there? Like, will there be an arm here?" And so they had to explain, the process of it. It doesn't work quite like that
Yeah.
for him. And then older kids may still have those questions, but may not be as forthcoming with them. So it can be helpful even with older kids, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, to say, "Do you have questions about, what this process was like and what it means to have these ashes?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So as they're, thinking through that, there's so many different options. A lot of our families here at the Dougie Center end up having pieces of jewelry made with the
Oh.
different pieces, portions of the ashes. So necklaces, bracelets, those can be really important things for people. Other
So that's
people.
pretty common, right? I mean, I've seen a lot of that. Is that a pretty specialized thing, or I mean, how does one? Where do you find out about that?
I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of different companies that do offer that opportunity for having jewelry made. There's some more specific places that will do like a hand-blown glass vase
Yeah.
that can get created. There's even a company that makes a memorial tree urn. I think it's even a local company in the Northwest here, and so
Yeah,
you
I've
can
seen that.
have a particular. It uses just a small portion of the ashes, so that others can be kept or scattered, and then you can plant that tree with that particular urn with the ashes in them.
It's all biodegradable, and it
Exactly.
grows a tree. Yeah, that's cool.
And there's some really, I've heard a lot of different stories. There's some really unusual things, or at least unusual to me. You can get lead pencils made from the ashes. There's even a company in Britain right now where you can get the ashes put into a vinyl record of the person who died's
Oh,
maybe their favorite
interesting.
album. So there's a lot of different things. I would say the majority of our families scatter the ashes, bury the ashes, or keep them at home.
Yeah, that's been, at least in my really small experience, it's been a little bit of scatter and a little bit of keep at home.
Hmm. And really helpful to talk, for Anna to talk with her kids, and thinking long term about it. I was talking with a teenager the other week in one of my groups who said, we've talked about scattering the ashes, but I really don't want to. I like having my dad in the house. So then I know if we move, we can always take him with us. And if we were to scatter him somewhere and then we moved far away, I wouldn't be able to visit the place of where he
Yeah,
is. And then for other people, it's important to scatter them in a place that felt really connected to the person who died.
yeah. You you showed me a list of things that people can do with ashes, and a couple that really stood out beyond the lead pencil were mixing into paint and tattoo ink.
Hmm.
Those are super interesting to me. Uh, I think we'll put, this is a great list, and probably you can find similar lists around the internet, but we'll throw this up on the show notes, so that if you're interested in the full list, some of the stuff we talked about and some of the stuff we didn't talk about with respect to ashes, we'll have it up there on the show notes.
Great. So should we get to, I know we have one more question to look at
Yeah,
today.
Eric wrote in too, and was curious. This is an interesting question. He'd like to know, he was whether he should go to his friend's mother's funeral. Sounds kind of tricky.
Hmm. Yeah, and especially if he didn't know his friend's mom.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it might be going in that direction, and that can be really tricky. As I think back over listening to people who talk about the funeral, the memorial, and talk about who was there and who wasn't there, the details can be pretty hazy for people of, I'm not exactly sure who was there, but if there's particular people that they thought would be there and weren't there, they definitely remember that. So it really stands out to people who's not there,
Mm,
sometimes even more so than who is there.
yeah.
And, keeping close at hand the idea that oftentimes the memorial is there to honor the person who died, but also to show support for the people who are alive. And if this person is a really good friend, uh, it makes sense to me to go if he may want to check in with his friend to see. But I wouldn't see it as an intrusion in any way.
So you're saying check in, maybe go, and also check in to see if they can be part of the support network, right?
Exactly, right. So there may be a chance since he's, good friends with this person whose mom died and he didn't know the mother, he may be in a unique role where he can be offering a support, tangible support. Like, are there people flying in from
Mm-hmm.
other places who need rides? Do you need someone to help pick up food or help someone to hand out programs? So to offer that really tangible support can give, this person who wrote in with the question something to do and also to provide that really specific support.
Yes. Yes. Do you think, well, how would that go with somebody who didn't know the deceased and was handing out programs?
How would that go?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like if that was me, I would be feeling a little awkward because somebody's going to come up to me and want to talk about, I don't know, I guess you just be honest and say, I'm friends with the family,
Mm-hmm.
and not say you have any really great memories with the mom necessarily, right?
Exactly, and again, it goes back to what we mentioned for Anna, the person, our first question today of having this person really check in with themselves before they offer support. Like, what are they comfortable with? So
Yeah.
if there's someone who's comfortable doing more behind the scenes things, then that's what they should offer. And it better than just saying, "What can I do to help?" Like, come up with a couple of choices of things you imagine they might need help with, because oftentimes the person who's grieving, they are pulled in so many different directions they don't even know what they need, so it can put a lot of pressure on them to say, tell me what you need, depending on the relationship you have with the person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that gets me all the time, people, good-hearted people wanting to help, and you've got maybe half a dozen people saying, "Hey, tell me how I can help." well, I
Right.
need somebody to help me figure out what to tell all the people who want to help,
Right.
right?
Right. Oftentimes you can do a really valuable role by being a buffer. You show up and you're right there by your friend at this memorial service, and you come up with a signal that your friend can give you when they need a break or
Yeah,
when they need you to step in, because there's going to be so many people most likely coming up and hugging this person and asking them questions. And so if you can have your like personal assistant buffer one,
yeah,
you can say, we'll be back in 5 minutes, or you
yeah,
know my friend really needs a break from hugs right now.
yep,
And then the friend, who's the one who's grieving, doesn't have to put themselves in that tough position of speaking up so much.
yeah, over and over, right? Yeah, that's good. That's good. That is a line of thinking that doesn't naturally occur to me. I feel like I'm always willing to, and I think I frequently do. I'm behind the scenes, behind the curtain kind of person. So,
Hmm.
I'll set up and clean up and not be out in front. Although being out in front's okay, but I just feel like I'm naturally better as a support kind of behind everybody. But it would be I like the idea of having somebody right next to you, being a buffer person. I don't know would you call him a buffer person?
That's how I've been in that role before, where
Really?
if I'm with a friend and they're, kind of is their closest person who died, and we're at the memorial service. And this actually happened to me this summer when a good friend of mine died this summer, and I was with their ex-partner at a memorial service, and everyone just kept coming up and wanting to talk to them, and I could tell they were like, I need a break from this. And so I just moved into like traffic control. Like, can you please go get a glass of water? Can you please go get us something to eat? Can you please go attend to, I was just
Yeah.
making things up, just to create space for this person who was feeling really overwhelmed. Because oftentimes at the memorial service, say, this person who wrote in with their question, that's, their friend's mom who died. So many people are going to be coming up and wanting to share their grief with this person's friend, and that can get really overwhelming.
Yeah, and I bet grievers are often very, very exhausted and tired out, but the role that you just described makes me tired just listening to you talk about it. I imagine. I think about me if I was in that role, I would need to go home and I don't know what, like not be around people for a while, take care of myself a little bit.
If you were in the buffer role.
Yeah, the buffer role.
Oh, for sure. And that's the thing. You show up to support your friend, but you also have to be making sure you're taking care of yourself so that you don't get so worn out, that you can't be there for your friend in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah. Is there a secondhand grief? You know what I'm trying to say? Like secondhand smoke affects you.
Mm.
Someone else's grief. If you care about them a lot, I imagine that would take somewhat of a toll on you, right?
Well, I think there's two aspects there, right? There's just the physical exertion and the mental exertion and the
Yeah,
emotional immersion of
yeah,
showing up for someone else and being really present for them. And then there's also the fact that you're at this memorial service or just listening to your friend talking about the fact that their parent died. There's a good chance that your experiences with grief are going to come up. And, if you've had a parent die, it might take you back to your experiences. Or if you haven't had a parent die, it might take you forward into imagining what it will be like for you. So just to be aware that if you are in that support role, that your grief can get activated as well.
yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I'm tired now. I'm ready to be done
So I shouldn't be
podcasting today.
calling on you to buffer for me this weekend if I need it, huh?
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, those were good questions. Um, Jana, anything else?
No, Brendan, I think that might take us to the end of this episode. And just for people to know, if they have questions that they'd like us to cover in one of our upcoming podcasts, that they can email us at help@Dougy, it's DOUGY.org.
That's right. And maybe put something in the subject line, like something about podcasts, so it's easier to sort out from the other help emails that we get. And be sure to check out the show notes on this podcast episode and all of them. This is episode 002. So we're not very far along down the road, but all of our podcasts can be found on dougy.org, dougy.org/podcast. And all the shows are arranged. They're most recent at the top and the show notes. So if we talk about some interesting book or link or long list of what you can do with ashes, it'll all be in there.
All right. Thank you so much, Brendon.
Thanks, Jana. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening.